What if, after all the years of sanctions, the endless inspections, and those countless diplomatic warnings, the world just woke up to the news that Iran had actually crossed the ultimate threshold? We aren't talking about theory or what ifs anymore. We are looking at a scenario where a strategically vital and, let's face it, highly volatile nation suddenly possesses enough nuclear weapons to fundamentally rewrite the balance of global power overnight. The number is 10. Now, sure, that might seem kind of small when you compare it to the massive civilization-ending stockpiles of the Cold War. But in this scenario, 10 is absolutely the most dangerous number in modern history. These aren't just 10 bombs. They are 10 points of absolute undeniable leverage. 10 massive reasons for any adversary to hesitate. And the truly terrifying part is that this seemingly small quantity completely upends the entire world order, without a single weapon ever actually being fired. So what if Iran builds 10 nuclear warheads? It's a scenario that forces a massive seismic shift in the psychological and geopolitical map of global security. Because the instant a country is believed to have those 10 warheads, every single neighbor, every rival, ally, and superpower, well, they all have to start calculating their own survival in a completely different way. All the old rules, they literally just vanish. Which brings us to part 1, the collapse of ambiguity. Moving from theory to reality. Up until this exact moment, world leaders could, argue over intent or debate timelines and technical thresholds, but the instant the world actually accepts that these 10 warheads exist, that ambiguity completely collapses. All those comfortable old assumptions about deterrence and diplomatic pressure just get thrown right out the window. Suddenly, we are dealing with the hard, undeniable reality of 10 points of leverage and fear, and every single nation has to reassess its position instantly. And the timeline of this reaction? It would be blindingly fast. We're talking within hours. Intelligence agencies worldwide are in an absolute scramble. Analysts are suddenly magnifying satellite imagery frame by frame, trying to figure out if these weapons are deployed or hidden, ironically stressing over photos of seemingly empty parking lots just in case. Meanwhile, regional military postures are completely reassessed. Within days, you'd see relentless global media coverage, with experts fiercely debating whether we should fear the weapons themselves or the chain reactions they provoke. And within weeks, we are looking at shadow discussions, secret meetings about preemptive strikes, emergency alliances, and the quiet kickoff of regional arms races. All of this instantly builds into a massive crisis of communication. In moments like this, language itself becomes a weapon for global powers like Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. The leaders are totally trapped. If they call the situation unacceptable, they risk provoking a deadly escalation. If they try to calm everyone down and call it manageable, they project weakness to an adversary. And if they call it a bluff and get it wrong, well, the consequences of that are catastrophic. Every single word becomes measured in cities and lives. Moving on to part 2, a new strategic reality, the geopolitical shockwave. The Middle East would absolutely feel this shockwave first, amplifying decades of mistrust and proxy wars into something much, much darker. Israel instantly views this through the lens of an existential threat. Regional powers, places like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey, they immediately reassess their own security, wondering if they now need their own nuclear insurance policies. And the global superpowers? They are forced into an incredibly delicate balancing act to frame a response. Every border gets tense. Every routine military exercise is suddenly watched with absolute dread. And this forces the ultimate question. Are these warheads a shield or are they a sword? Like, what does a nation actually do with 10 warheads? Are they meant strictly as a defensive shield for deterrence, just to make sure nobody attacks them? Or is this deterrence really just step 1 toward coercion, using them as a sword to basically force concessions from enemies under the constant threat of nuclear fire? Here's part 3, the network of fear, exploring what happens beyond the warheads themselves. You see, these weapons wouldn't just sit quietly in some underground bunker as isolated objects. They would trigger a cascading network of fear across literally every sector of life. Families are suddenly terrified about war. Businesses start panicking over collapsing markets. Energy companies are freaking out over the Strait of Hormuz and global oil supply chains, while airlines are frantically scrambling to figure out safe travel routes. It's wild to think about, but a single military development like this instantly paralyzes global commerce and everyday civilian peace of mind. And here is how that fear actually operationalizes into shadow politics. Step 1. The regional balance signals a permanent shift. Step 2. Rivals decide diplomacy just isn't enough anymore and push for their own nuclear deterrence. Step 3. We start seeing massive, urgent investments pouring into things like missile defenses, underground bunkers, and cyber resilience. Which leads right into step 4. The entire region descends into silent preparation for conflict. It's this eerie situation where nobody actually wants the war, but every state feels utterly compelled to prepare for it in the dark. That leads us to part 4, the nuclear dilemma, the strategic paradox. Now, there is a massive divide among experts on how this actually plays out in reality. On one side, we have the argument for containment by deterrence. This view suggests that nuclear weapons actually create caution. Since nobody wants to invite total annihilation, it basically puts a ceiling on major conflicts. But then, on the flip side, you have the terrifying argument for uncontrollable escalation. This theory argues that a small arsenal makes the conditions for war vastly more dangerous. It creates a sort of floor under conflict, making smaller proxy wars way more likely because actors just assume a major nuclear war won't happen. It is a brutal irony, really. A weapon built to prevent war can simultaneously invite it. And it all comes down to the margin for error. Nuclear weapons are ultimately about trust, credibility, and flawless control. But in our highly connected age, with fast communications, cyber warfare, and automated satellite surveillance, that margin for error is terrifyingly thin. One misread radar return, one single false signal, or just a simple communication breakdown, and the world finds itself staring at a catastrophic scenario that nobody actually intended, but literally everybody feared. Part 5, the burden on ordinary lives, looking at the true human cost. If we slow down for a second and just look at this on a real human level, it's ordinary citizens who carry the greatest burden of this uncertainty. A parent hearing this news isn't thinking about abstract geopolitical strategy. They're hit with a visceral barrage of very real fears. Would schools remain open? Will travel be safe? Will the cost of living just skyrocket? Will conscription increase and take my kids? Will there be another war over something as simple as a border clash or a random drone strike? I think this captures exactly why all of this matters so deeply. The world watches nuclear events with such intense anxiety, not because we all just love geopolitical analysis, but because every single geopolitical headline is secretly about whether our daily routines, our holidays, and our family safety will actually survive the next crisis. At its core, it's about the fundamental human right to just have an ordinary future. And finally, part 6, humanity's cruel choice, the ethics of response. Returning to the halls of power for a moment, we can see the impossible puzzle leaders face when confronting a brand new nuclear reality. Every single option on the table carries massive risk. If you apply harsh pressure, well, you might just strengthen the resolve of the state that acquired the weapons in the first place. Try to negotiate? Your rivals might read that as weak acceptance. What about preemptive military action? You could instantly ignite the exact full-scale war you are trying to avoid. But then again, doing absolutely nothing and just ignoring it allows this terrifying new reality to become completely normalized. This right here is the cruel, unsolvable problem of nuclear proliferation. It's wild to think that a remarkably small number of weapons, just 10, is entirely enough to force the reshaping of global alliances, military doctrines, and political commitments. Once this nuclear threshold is crossed, the international order really begins to crack. The world simply becomes more anxious, far more suspicious, and entirely dependent on the flawless judgment of a few key leaders who absolutely cannot afford to fail. There's a really powerful realization from our source material on this. It says, even when they are not used, they live in the mind. I mean, wow. That brilliantly illustrates the hidden cost of living with nuclear weapons. They permanently shape the imagination and the culture of entire generations. Children grow up learning that some weapons are just too powerful to even think about directly. It seeps into our media, our education, and leaves us with this permanent sense of strategic anxiety. Which leaves us with this final, lingering question to close out our explainer today. If a threshold like this is actually crossed, will the nuclear age become more manageable through the caution of deterrence, or drastically more unstable through the chaos of proliferation? It really reveals how fragile peace truly is, and how close humanity can come to the edge before deciding whether to step back or keep moving forward into the unknown. Think about that one.